Hello music lovers, and welcome to my new YouTube series, Folk Music History, where we discuss all things related to folk music. The first few series is going to be specifically on Appalachian folk ballads. Episode number 1, we're going to talk about women's warning songs, or Come All Ye Women's Warning Songs. Before we get started, a quick disclaimer: there will be adult content in this video, sexual content, childbirth. There will be talk of death statistics with childbirth, and we're not really going to be very graphic with this, but I do want any fair warning. There might be some triggers related to sexual violence. I don't ever want my content to make anyone feel uncomfortable. Okay, so let's get started. Let's set the scene. We're in Appalachian Mountain regions. We're talking about specific regions in Appalachian Mountains, Kentucky, Tennessee, and the Carolinas. The time frame we're talking about is mainly mid-1800s to the turn of the century. Let's say right before 1920, mostly like between mid-1800s and 1910. Where did that music come from? Who brought it here? What does it sound like? English, Irish, and Scottish immigrants moving and settling into the eastern U.S. mountain regions. They bring their folk music with them. They bring their sound and their songs with them from their homeland and make it their own as they've settled and write new songs. And then that genre becomes Anglo American folk music and Celtic folk music. Women mourning songs is a branch of Anglo-American folk genre. They're written in the women's perspective, and the basic classification for what a woman's warning song is, sole purpose is to warn young ladies, young women, of the sexual wiles of men. Think back and get a full perspective why this genre came about. How did this happen? Why did it start? 100 to 200 years ago, folk music in these mountain regions from there on in was written and performed and collected and passed down. The majority of them were women doing this. They're in the home, they're taking care of the children, they're raising the children, they collect things, they're collecting quilts and string and memorabilia and keeping them in boxes, and they would collect songs as well. And in this book that I reference a lot of my information from, Finding Her Voice, the Saga of Women in Country Music, I'm getting a lot of my information from the first few chapters of this book. Great book, I highly recommend. I will put the references for this in the description box below. In this book, they talk about women social workers in the area and teachers. They would have the school children come and bring all the songs that they know that were written down or that they had memorized and share with the class. A+ for social workers, as per usual. So since women were so predominant in folk music and the collecting of folk music, it makes sense to how this women warning genre came about. They were written in the woman's perspective. It was known for women that performed folk songs and collected folk songs. It was kind of like a hobby. Would have 50 to 100 songs memorized and ready to perform for the community and for their household. Some songs would be sung more during household chores, and some would be performed in like a party, like setting a community gathering, that sort of thing. Women would memorize and preserve and pass down these folk songs and for generations. And then around the turn of the century and the 1910s, 1915s, folk song collectors started coming into the Appalachian region and interviewing these women and officially documenting these songs, and that's a good part of why we have them today. So we have the women of the Appalachian Mountain regions to thank, and also these folk music collectors. And the folk music collector that collected this song that I'm going to do a rendition of, her name was Maud Minish Sutton, and she collected Come All Ye Fair and Tender Maiden along with 50 other songs in 1915. And these songs for this time period, as individuals were coming into this region to collect these ballads, they're expecting to get like preserved Elizabethan ballads and Anglo-Saxon culture, but what they're really getting is the tell-all truth of the woman's perspective in life in the Appalachian Mountains, which is pretty incredible. But at that time, the people listening to them, like coming in expecting to get like a preserved piece of Elizabethan history, were actually coming in and being shocked that these women are up here, single or married, performing these songs about promiscuity, incest, unwanted pregnancy, death, complications, husbands cheating on them, suicide, all this stuff. It's really some content that was really ahead of its time, I think. That's my opinion. If you're a woman in the mid-1800s to the turn of the century, or prior to the mid-1800s, you're working and living in the home, and as a young girl at this time in this region, let's be honest, you don't have much to look forward to besides getting married. The rules of your social role, the rules of your parents would be so strict that basically all you were allowed to do was the chores in the house that you were required to do per your gender, and look forward to getting married, find you a husband. Oh yeah, and you can like collect these folk songs and, you know, perform and sing on the side if you want to. So that was basically it. I don't want to generalize too much because women in folk music is such a broad topic and so complex that I might just do a whole video on that. But I wanted to go into that a little bit more so we could all be on the same page when I start talking more specifically about these women warning songs. Let's focus more on the whole idea of why women were even writing songs about this. And really, mid-1800s to the turn of the century, we really have a skewed notion about this because this is very rural, very secluded area. We're not even living in the technology of mid-1800s if you're in this area. We're really frozen in Daniel Boone times. Like 1775 technology we're in when talking about living in the rural Appalachian mountain region. No running water, no electricity, no hospitals, no doctors. Well, at least when you're talking about when you're giving birth, you don't have a doctor, you don't have a hospital to go to, there's no birth control, and really the rights of a woman is very limited. When you get married, your wifely duty is to satisfy his needs. You do not have the right to say no, basically. That combined with the fact that there's no birth control leads to a lot of babies. A married woman in the Appalachian Mountains having a lot of babies. And childbirth is very dangerous at this time. Again, no hospitals, no painkillers, no midwives really. I guess if you count your mother helping you give birth, or the grandmother, or the mother-in-law, they would be there. The grannies would be there helping the woman give birth. Any and all complications post-childbirth would go untreated, and it was much more common for women to die during their childbearing years. 1 out of 30 mothers would die during their childbearing years at the turn of the century. And if we go back to the mid-1800s, it was double that. And nowadays it's about 2 in 10,000, I think. We've improved greatly since then, which is good for us, but not so good for them. Even miscarriages would be fairly dangerous, and it was also common to die of complications from miscarriages as well. Very, very dangerous to be a married woman in their childbearing years. It's no wonder that these songs were written and this genre was created and very, very popular in the Appalachian Mountains in this time period. Let's think back to our chores that we're doing as a woman in the Appalachian Mountains at this time. You're doing the cooking, you're doing the cleaning. You don't have running water, so you have to go to the stream and keep hauling water, which is an intensive task as well. You're cooking and your laundry. You don't have machines to help you. You don't have electricity to help you. So laundry in general was an all-day chore, if not a week-long chore. And you're doing the sewing. Besides, like the husband goes to town to buy overalls, but otherwise you're like the woman is sewing her clothes and their children's clothes, or at least doing the repair work, let's just say. I mean, the Victorian way of doing things isn't to make clothes by hand, so we could maybe assume that they were able to go to the store and buy some clothes for not just the man in the family, but I don't quite have a record of that. We have all these chores, and meanwhile, that hard labor, no pun intended, it does not end when a woman is pregnant or recovering from birthing a child. If you have a female relative in your family, if they're living nearby, they might be able to come help with the chores and help take care of you if you're not feeling well, but it only lasts for 1 to 2 weeks, and then they have to go back and take care of their own household. So it's no joke. It's hard stuff. So these songs are about real life. And it's dramatized too, but they're telling it like it is. It's not all lovey-dovey, marriage is great, all romance and, Valentine's Day cards. It's the cold hard truth of what marriage and motherhood could be for you in the Appalachian Mountain region at this time. That's what women's warning songs were. A very very popular women's warning song called Come All Ye Fair and Tender Maidens by Red Tail Ring. Some popular women's warning songs you might also know other than Come All Ye Fair and Tender Maidens: Silver Dagger, Little Sparrow, and actually On Top of Old Smoky. I can read some of the lines for you here. It's like cookie cutter women's warning criteria that's in this song, and this song has been preserved for over 160 years. And you know, it was the oldest we have documentation of it being written was in 1788, and then fast forward 163 years and it's hitting the top charts in 1951 when the Weavers redid it, a popular folk group of the 1940s and 50s. These songs are still popular and they're lasting through time, and it's relevant, it's here, it's happening. So let me read some of the lyrics of On Top of Old Smoky that is related to the women's warning genre. Courting's a pleasure and parting's a grief, but a false-hearted lover is worse than a thief. A thief will but rob you and take all you've saved, but a false-hearted lover will lead you to your grave. The grave will consume you and turn you to dust, and where is the young man a woman can trust? So there's a big theme right there. A lot of betrayal by the man you thought loved you. A lot of it is about betrayal, heartbreak. It's not all romance and lovey-dovey. It's not all it's cracked up to be, you know, and a lot of it towards the end, it ends with a woman in the song confessing, I'll just stay single for the rest of my life, which arguably some people think it means that they've committed suicide at the end of the song. Sometimes it does mean that. I like to argue, at least, especially with modern renditions, that it literally does mean that she just won't marry, that she just will literally just stay single for the rest of her days. And that's how I like to think of it, unless they're plain out saying that I'm done, I'm going to commit suicide because life is just not worth it. But let's not get too dark. That's where the trigger warning came in. Some reasons why I think this genre is significant to me and why I think it's still relevant today is I personally find it refreshing out of all these other songs that are really, I feel like as an unmarried woman in my 20s, feeling the social pressures from music, from movies, just from society in general, that oh, I need to get married, or I have not been successful in life, or you're not finished with your female social duties until you get married, even if you have a partner. And still having these songs to hold on to and relate to, especially thinking about how old they are and when they were written, it's a comfort to know that I'm not the only one out there who maybe marriage isn't right for them. And obviously and gratefully, for very different reasons than it was back then. Reasons not to get married have changed greatly. For the better, I should say. But it's just refreshing in a society where there's so much pressure for an unmarried woman to find a man and get married, to have these songs to fall back on. But anyway, so I have a special appreciation and admiration and connection to these songs and the women who wrote them and collected them, made it possible for us to sing and hear them today. And I just love how these songs could be used to give women in a time where the social classes between men and women were so unequal, that women can use these songs to perform and use folk songs to bump them up in their social class, maybe even get them at almost equal standing with the men in society. So I think that's really incredible. That's why I think there's a lot of value in this genre specifically, and folk music written by women in general. So anyway, I think that's all I have for you. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed watching, feel free to press the thumbs up and like this video, and hit subscribe if you want to see more. I will be uploading every other Friday on Folk Music Fridays, all about folk music. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all later. Okay. Reading from The Illusion Is Gone. Fair warning, I'm reading my lyrics here, okay. Okay, 1 out of 30 mothers. Let me get all my burps out. My gosh.